Warning, this video does contain spoilers for Snowball Earth. So if you are currently reading it or you haven't read it and you're planning to read it, please click off this video. While I will try my hardest to not spoil it a lot, there is no promises that I will not be spoiling a lot. So again, if you are planning to read or if you are reading and you're not caught up, please do not watch this video. Thank you.
Snowball Earth, a manga that I recently just picked up from my bookstore, and one that I picked up because I simply watched the anime and I was like, maybe I would like this more as a manga. Not saying this in a way to say that the anime was bad or anything like that. It's just that sometimes with some stories, I feel like I understand them better in their written form rather than their animated form. Now, this is my first analytical or analyzing video. Analytical probably wasn't the right word. But I'm only analyzing volume 1 of Snowball Earth. Like I stated previously, there will be spoilers. I don't know if they're going to be severe or not because at the moment in time of recording this analysis that I have isn't really that long, but I do feel like this is the best way to sum up Snowball Earth with a little bit of my commentary. So, this is going to be broken up into 3 sections: writing, art, and pacing. Originally, when I wrote this sort of analyzing document slash script, whatever you want to call it, I was thinking about the good and the bad. I don't really have anything bad to say about this manga, and I can't really think of anything bad to say. Really, one, because it's just the first volume. I do not know how it's going to be after the fact. So maybe there will be some bad things that will, or some things that I will find kind of bad in terms of, I don't really know if I like this or not later on in the story. But for right now, just analyzing the first volume, there was nothing that I could find that was bad. So now let's get into it. The writing. The writing does a good job of you understanding the character and his personal hardships. Some examples of this is when the older school kids were making fun of him for not being able to write kanji. When he was younger, he tried to be involved with the other kids, but they didn't seem to want to be bothered with him. Now, to elaborate more on this with my own commentary. I'm sorry. To elaborate on this more with my own commentary and to just not bore you guys with something that sounds like you're just in school. Um I think that this manga's writing, especially while kind of rereading it and like just skimming over it while I was writing this kind of analyzing type of paper slash script, this writing does something that while I do feel like a lot of mangas and just good literature in general does this well, this writing do does introduce the character, I'm sorry, does introduce the character and his personality very, very well. um I think a lot of times when I'm reading newer things, it's always hard to gauge how the character is, and sometimes you got to get a couple of chapters in. But I think from the start, from the very beginning, the very first page, and I'm not even exaggerating, from the very first page, it helps you understand how this character may be. Not necessarily in a sense of predictability, where like, oh, you could probably guess every response that he may, say, but in a way of this character does feel very real, I guess, is the best way for me to explain it. This character does feel very real. But let's continue. Um, this led him to build an attachment to the machine, which the machine or the robot is named Yukio. I'm going to further explain what I mean by this. Um, Overall, this led to him having social anxiety. So Tetsuyo, which is the MC, has social anxiety because of the reasons of him being looked at as a social outcast, but not in the way that I guess you would normally see it in terms of like people bullying him. Now, while the older kids did bully him and everything, him being a social outcast in a way of, like I said, spoilers, he wasn't a normal kid, right? Imagine you're this little elementary school kid and you cannot confide in anyone. You can't even confide in your own father. Your father is obsessed with his work. He's a scientist that makes these machines that are supposed to combat the evils of the world, which are kaiju. So you don't really, from what this first volume at least is what I'm getting from it, he doesn't really have this much of a connection with his father. And this is even shown in one of the flashbacks when his father's face is kind of blurred out or has like this black misty cloud over it. So it is implying that maybe his relationship with his father wasn't really the best, and that his father only looked at him for the beneficial reasons instead of looking at Yukio and not Yukio, I'm sorry. Instead of looking at Tetsuo as Tetsuo, his son. So you can imagine you're tasked with saving the world. Your father isn't really a father, and people are kind of envious of you. You have these group of people that are kind of envious of you because one, you don't really attend a normal school, you don't do anything. All you really kind of do is just go out and fight. But people also don't know you because you can't build a bond with anybody. You're tasked with being the savior. You're tasked with everybody leaning on you, and you literally have the weight of the world on your shoulders. So you can imagine why this would lead to social anxiety, especially when he never had the chance to be open with other people. Um, but let's continue. He yearns for a human bond. Even Yukio wants him to have human friends. Another thing the writing does well is showcasing the strong connection Tetsuo and Yu-Gi-Oh have. They are two sides of the same coin. They show deep appreciation for each other. Yu-Gi-Oh was Tetsuo's first ever friend, and Tetsuo is who gave Yu-Gi-Oh an identity. This is established not only by Yu-Gi-Oh bluntly stating it, but in a flashback, Yu-Gi-Oh was advocating for robot lives and not wanting to die. When there was a kaiju threat, he was meant to self-destruct. So, little, I guess, information on that. Um, so when Yukio, the machine, the robot, was made, these threats of kaiju, which if y'all don't know in like Japanese, like I guess culture, you could say. So here I said kaiju are like demons and stuff, but I meant to say kaiju are monsters. I do later correct it by saying that they're like space monsters, but yeah, kaiju are monsters. They're not demons. I do not know why I thought they were demons. I don't even know why I said that. At the time of me recording this, I was trying to get it out quick and everything like that, but they're monsters. They are not demons. This one, these kaiju kind of seem to be like space monsters. Is not really, like I said, this is the first volume, so I can't sit here and give you guys everything. But it seems like there are these space monsters or these other inhabitants of life that are here to infiltrate Earth. But when Tetsuyo, not Tetsuyo, sorry, when Yukio was made, he was meant to be basically just a big robotic bomb. He was meant to surround or grab the attention of a number of these like kaiju and self-destruct in space and harming a lot of the kaiju without harming humans, and there would be no casualties. So essentially, Yukio was not meant to have any human feelings or emotions. Now, it's not really explained how Yukio became, I guess, this intellectual and conscious and aware to where he was protesting. At least it wasn't, further explained upon in the first volume. I'm sure maybe it will be explained later on in later volumes, but It does not seem like it was explained upon in this first volume, but I do find this unique, which I'm going to talk about later. When Tetsuo heard that he didn't want to die, Yukio is who I mean by he. This gave him the strength to make sure Yukio lives. I do find this interesting. I do not know how intentional this was or if it's meant to even be looked at this deep, but it is so unique to give the machine very human like emotions. I feel like part of the reason Yukio was able to develop such a human sense of self and sense of existence is because of the compassion and connection Tetsuo showed to him. So, we're going to get into a heavy spoiler here, guys. So, well, I guess heavy spoiler, but not. It is a heavy spoiler, but he doesn't really die, Yukio. So while they're in this space battle, they're defeating these kaiju. They are told that like, hey, you guys got to go out here. Y'all got to go out to space or go out into to space basically and fight these kaiju until our weapon from our ship is prepared. So Yukio and Tetsuo go out and they try to grab the attention of these kaiju. They succeed, but what doesn't succeed is the ship firing at the kaiju where they're supposed to fire at to basically wipe out majority of the kaiju threat. This leads to Yukio basically dying. He dies and he sends off Yukio, right? He dies and he sends off, I'm sorry, Tetsuo. I gotta stop confusing y'all. He dies and he sends off Tetsuo. And I think one of the most powerful things that he says in the manga, Yukio, that he says in the manga so far, and I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, is him talking about how he has sinned. And his sin was that Yukio was able to live this life because Tetsuo gave him a life. Tetsuo gave him a life, and he was no longer looked at as just a robot that self destructs and defeats kaiju. He was looked at as the name that he was given, Yukio. And his greatest sin was taking away the life that Tetsuyo was supposed to live as a child. And I find it so beautiful because, like I said, this gave a human sense of self and existence within this robot. And what I say is, I don't know if this is intentional because I don't know if this is really supposed to be a commentary on the relationships that humans and machines, and I guess in our sense, obviously, it's like AI will form and will bond. Will AI become conscious enough to be like, oh, we see that you're using us for everything, but you guys are no longer using yourselves. Now, like I said, I don't know if that was the intention. I don't know if that was a purpose. And I don't know if, but to do a little bit of deeper diving and thinking, who knows? Maybe this was, or maybe that is what the commentary is supposed to speak on in the deeper meaning. But I digress. Even if it's not, I still find it beautiful because I believe the compassion that Tetsuo showed Yukio was the reason why he was able to basically gain these human emotions of guilt. Because essentially, it wasn't really Yukio's fault that Tetsuo didn't have friends. It was other people. But the fact that Yukio puts the blame on himself for something that drastic is very human like and honestly very emotionally aware. Um and I like that in a way. I like the way that this is showcased through that. Tetsuo did what I believe he wanted others to do. So what I that's pretty self-explanatory, but I do believe that Tetsuo did what he wanted others to do. He seen that Yukio was crying out, talking about how he didn't want to die. So he took control of Tetsuo. He took control of Yukio. I'm sorry. He took control of Yukio and gave Yukio essentially a life worth living and seeing. He no longer was just this robot. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I believe that this is something that Tetsuo wanted himself. He seen maybe a bit of himself as a child. He seen himself. He seen someone just like him, and he promised him, "Hey, look, I'm not going to let you die." And while I know this may be a stretch, but stay with me here. Yes, obviously Tetsuo wasn't dying or going to die, but the fact of him being alone and nobody really, associating themselves with him is kind of on the same level of being dead. No one around you to talk to you, to confide in you, to have conversations with. You walk around the world feeling like nobody wants to get to know you. You walk around the world feeling like you don't fit in anywhere. You have no connections, you have no relationships, you have no valuable moments with other human beings. It's as if you're a dead person. But the thing is if you died in the womb and never got to experience the sight of life. I feel like the thing that was heavy on Tetsuo was the fact that he's seen these things. He was able to see people have friends. He was able to see people be happy. Now, it was explained, or it is talked about how later, where when there was or I guess a flashback, but around the time when Yukio self-destructed, how he was like, when I seen people have fun, I no longer was basically hurt by that or sad by that fact. And it's because obviously Yukio was his first friend. So he no longer was sad because now he could understand how they felt. Even though it wasn't in the same context or the same way, he could still understand how they felt because at least he had someone that he had that connection and that attachment to. This compassion is also equally shared. Uh this compassion is also equally shared. Yukio knows Tetsuo has social anxiety. Tetsuo is always reading this book about how to make friends, but Yukio calls it an emotionless book. And this here is what I also liked. So there's this book that Tetsuo reads called I think it's How Even a Kaiju, or 777 Ways How Even a Kaiju Can Make Friends. So the book is about making friends. If you really think about it, it's like these videos that you kind of see out in the world where they're like, "Oh, you're just an incel. Let me talk to you about how to get women, how to be socially accepted, and you're like this because you're not this way." Now, while the things in the book, it show little like passages of the book, it wasn't saying nothing really crazy. I mean, it was kind of saying things pretty basic, like encountering people, where you should, how you encounter people. Like you can encounter people outside, anywhere, at a coffee shop, at work, at school, introducing yourself, the basics, basically. But I find it's interesting that Yukio calls this an emotionless book because now, even looking back at it, one is not really emotionless because it is telling you the very basic ways of how to make friends. But I find, but I think the irony, I guess, in where the emotionlessness is at in this book is, while it does tell you the steps on how to acquire friends and how to get friends, it doesn't tell you about the interpersonal deep connections between a friend and you, right? It's telling you how to go out and how to have people basically be in your circle and on your side, and basically really just acquaintances, but not the fact of a friend as a person that cares for you. A friend is a person that is there for you every step of the way. And maybe it was said later on in the book in those 777 steps, but who knows? You don't really ever see him talk about, you don't ever really see him get past the first like three steps. So even then, I find it very, very interesting that he calls this emotionless because while it's not emotionless in the sense of how you do get friends, but I think the way that makes it emotionless is it's talking about it as if it's just simple and easy. Like, yeah, if you just go out and you go talk, you don't know. Some people may not, some people probably don't want to be bothered. You know, you can't always just go out and ask people, hey, let's be friends, let's be cool. Again, like I said, I could be looking into this first volume and into this too deeply, but I like doing this. This ties back into my interest in making the machine so human like. The monologue is also good. Now, this is a transition into just what I think is good outside of the personal relationships. The monologue. It helps you it helps us understand the character more and why the decisions he makes are the ones he chooses. So, this manga has a lot of monologue within it when it comes down to once Tetsuo lands back on Earth and the first few moments of him trying to find like basically human life. Right? Well, he starts looking for human life or trying to find human life because he gets hungry. But it nonetheless he tries to find human life. And I feel like the monologue and when you're walking with him and when he's, talking to himself, you understand more and more why he is the way he is. And there are things like the first kaiju he encounters from the hole he sees, he makes this very hasty decision and it's like his personality almost changes. He goes from this very nervous, socially awkward, anxious person to this person that is confident in his ability to make something out of nothing. And I think that is very, very deep because when he's fighting his kaiju, all he is on this like excavator, right? This excavator that he got from this old man that basically froze to death, but he had no weapons. Um he didn't have Yukio. And honestly, I thought it was going to stay this way, and I wish it Loki kind of did. And I'll talk about later on why it didn't stay that way and what happened. But I wish it did stay that way to, I guess, in a way like show, but I like show him, I guess, his character development. But I understand why it didn't stay that way because if it did, I mean, I feel like he has a lot more character development to go. And I feel like the way how Yukio treats Tetsuo and always lets him know, like, hey, um, you do need to make human friends and have human interaction. Uh, Again, I'm going to talk about this later on in this video, but I do think what happens later, why I think it's okay. Okay, I will explain why I think it's okay. Um, in all, I do think this writing is great. If I had a gripe with the writing, I would say something. I would say sometimes when it feels like it's supposed to be a very serious moment, it gets overshadowed with comedic elements. But I think this is the point of the writing. Sometimes because of who Tetsuo is, no matter the situation he is in, his anxiety causes him to act in ways that would be looked at as unnatural in certain cases. Maybe this is maybe this is nitpicking, but I think when he came back to Earth expecting praise and he seen the planet was frozen, his tone came off more as shocked rather than concern. But I do think I'm looking at this wrong, so I won't let that take away from how I view the writing. So now I can get in the point that I was speaking about earlier. But first, I'm going to attack this. I do think I'm nitpicking because when I reread a little bit of it and I glanced over it, while he was expecting praise and he was shocked, I think he was shocked more so that civilization in itself seemed as if it was no more rather than the lack of praise. When I first wrote this, I'm thinking, oh, why are you shocked if you have been gone? He realized that it's been 10 years, right? So the story starts off in 2025, or it's 2025 when he's fighting the kaiju in space and everything like that, and then it's 10 years after that, so then it's 2035 and civilization is no longer. I understand that maybe like you expect that civilization should especially in his case because he thought like maybe like they fought off all the kaiju and all the kaiju was dead. But I think maybe where this little loophole is that uh the kaiju were defeated, but I don't think when Yukio exploded, it was all of the kaiju that were defeated. Yes, that was his function to defeat them, but there were still kaiju and there were still threats of kaiju. And this is even stated like even in the back the flashback that like the reason why basically Yukio was made was to destroy the kaiju or to limit the number of kaiju, but it wasn't really to kill all. He wasn't really there to kill all kaiju. So in a way, I'm like, maybe I'm looking at this too deep, or maybe this is just something that I'm looking at wrong, and I'm going to kind of look at it that way because I think it was more so the fact of, oh no, he was just surprised that the world that he basically failed. He was surprised that he failed, not in the fact that he didn't really get praise, or who knows, it could be both. Now, another thing that I felt like I was probably nitpicking at. So y'all know how earlier, right? I said I found the beautiful thing is Yukio telling him that his greatest sin is that he has robbed him of finding friends and getting friends. So Yukio, right? Big spoiler. Yukio dies. He explodes in space. We see that he explodes in space. Tetsuo is about to die by this very different looking kaiju, and it's giving these kaiju are evolving. It's showing you that these kaiju seem to be able to evolve. So Tetsuo is about to die. He's in the grasp of this kaiju, all bloodied and defeated. But for a last ditch effort that Tetsuo didn't know, Yukio backed up the escape pod that he forced Yukio back onto the earth with. He backed up his memories and his personality into that escape pod. So when Tetsuo is about to die, Yukio comes back and basically saves the day. Now, where I say I'm going to let this go is while I do think it is maybe kind of iffy writing that this robot destroyed himself. This robot with very human emotions destroyed himself and sent the person that he cared for most on Earth to get the life he was supposed to have despite the hardships of what was going on, and the fact that Tetsuo accepted this hardship by taking on a kaiju without anything, and then the savior comes back that told him, hey, no, you need a life. Basic, not in that way, but like you need a life and you deserve a life outside of me. Comes back and saves him, and it seems like maybe he is finna strip him of that life. Not strip him. I'm using harsh terminology. Not strip him in a way of take him away from that, but this dependency that Tetsuo had on Yukio, I don't know how it will affect in the next volumes, in the next chapters to come up. I don't think it will affect that bad. I think, and I say I'm going to let this go because he came in to save Tetsuo, right? He came in to save Tetsuo, and I'm not talking about the other character that there is that we got introduced into. I forgot to kind of write about her in this, but Nogi is her name. Um, my fault, y'all. My throat kind of getting a little scratched. But Nogi, when Tetsuo goes out and basically kind of just sacrifices himself, she is like, why is he trying to save us? Why does he care about saving us? And I think that because she has his interest, or he piqued her interest, that Yukio coming back will not stagnate anything. So now let's go on to the second part, the art. And I'm sorry, y'all, I'm not gonna yap y'all ear off too much long. Now, I'm not for real an art buff, so I don't know how, I hope not to aggravate the art community and everything like that. So this part may sound very, very basic and not that, deep, obviously, but the detail in the artwork is amazing. The scratches on Yukio or the gore parts when the kaiju gets slain, fire. Okay, so I feel like the detailing in this art or in this is the best part. And I feel like, the way that they draw Yukio or Tetsuo's facial expressions are also amazing. And I know that those are probably basic things and like art in general, but it makes the character feel like so much like themselves to where I don't know, it just I love that so much. But I also like the usage of sometimes it's like the heavy inking. Um and then the big panels, right? The explosions, the kaiju, the panels where it's showing everything. I don't know how inspired it, like what artist probably inspired this mangaka. I would say maybe not one, but the artist who draws for one. I can't think of his name right now. I'm so sorry, but I wonder what was his artistic inspirations. Um, and but even the big scale panels when Yukio blows up, even the facial expressions, sometimes they are detailed, but I feel like the emotions that are drawn on Tetsuo's face are so uniquely him. While I know there may be some art heads out there that will say this is basic knowledge in art, which there probably is, especially comics and manga, I know it may not be the craziest thing. For example, I feel like Boys Abyss, one of my favorite mangas. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm talking about one of my favorite psychological, like fucked up mangas. Does a good job of showing despair on the MC's face. I just like how every expression from Tetsuo is this goofy look of fear or him questioning himself and his actions. The art is great nonetheless, and I believe it will only get better along the way, if not stay the same, which is already great on its own. I honestly don't think that there has to be like better art or like the mangaka has to draw better. I don't think that whatsoever. So I imagine that it probably will get better along the way. Uh and he shows that he does have some form of range with his style. From every little way he draws, from like when he was talking about when Tetsuo was talking about this feeling in his chest, to the goofy ways he looked, to the close up shots and like the close up panel shots, everything. It seems like he has range. So I feel like if he really wanted to draw very, very detailed or very like just ultra crazy, I feel like he could definitely do that. And lastly, told you guys I wasn't going to yap your ear off. The pacing. Now, this is the only time I'm going to do this. I will never ever do this with any other series, so I'm very sorry that I'm doing this with this one. And you guys probably may expect I'm going to do this with other series, but no, I'm not going to do this with other series. The pacing. This is the only time I will ever compare a manga to its anime adaptation on this channel. I'm only making an exception to this because I saw the first episode of the anime first, and then I thought the manga could probably help me get better into it. Like I stated, can't speak, very early on in the video. The anime opens up with the flashback of Tetsuo being bullied and then accepting Yukio. But in the manga, it opens up with them in space and the battle. The flashbacks show in a way to add a stronger connection between you and the story, and I just like how the manga does it more than the anime. Now, before anybody tries to sit here and be like, but analyst, but manga analyst, MA, listen. Yes, the same effect, you could say, well, you were just being nitpicky. The same effect could have happened in the anime. Yes, you can. But I think personally, what makes this, because in a way in the anime they kind of really just flip flopped it. So after the flashback had happened, you go after it opens up with the flashback, you go into him reading the basically self improvement book in the pod, and then him going in loading up in Yukio and stuff like that. So they really just flip flopped it. But I think the way in the manga how it did it, where he was basically scolding him, not scolding him, but like they're like, "Oh, are you really reading this? Like reading those again?" And then it showed the flashback of the kids and stuff not accepting him and everything like that. I felt like that just hit 10 times harder than you are opening up with that. And then you're getting, because it, I don't know how to explain it, but the anime, and I got to get my words up, I got to get my vocabulary up. The way the anime does it, in my opinion, when it opened up like that, it looked like, I feel like it conveyed the same message differently, but I felt like the manga had a stronger impact on conveying the message. And what I mean by the message is the message of Tetsuo gaining human friends, right? Becoming friends with other humans. I believe it did gain the same message, or it was telling the same message. But here is where I personally think the biggest difference is, and the impact of it is. In the manga, when he's going out to Yukio, and it's in well, the very first opening page is telling you about the kaiju and how long they've been threatening the world and everything like that. But when he goes out to Yukio, and Yukio is like, "Oh, you're already reading these things," and then it shows the flashbacks on why he was already reading it. I feel like the impact was the fact that in the manga it conveyed that he was facing this for a very, very long time. In the anime, it seems as if he started doing this instantly. Right? He right after he got rejected by society and everything like that, he instantly just started looking at how to better himself and how to be a better kid, or how to be a better human being that interacts with other human beings. This is what I feel like the anime conveyed. But what the manga conveyed is that this is a long lasting thing he was having trouble with. And he's been trying his hardest to not have trouble with this anymore. In the anime, I guess the best way I can say it is the anime gave it a very red pill like thing, and then the manga gave it a very personal, internal feeling, rather than it's like, oh, you got to do this because, oh, he's just doing this because he's not accepting and he just wants to be better, right? If that makes sense. I don't know, maybe I'm just blabbing and it's like, bro, what the fuck are you saying? But and it could just be that. But yeah, the pacing, now going on to just the pacing in general, the pacing feels like it's going along with Tetsuo. And that's another thing. Also, it didn't feel like it was going along with Tetsuo in the anime. I don't know why. Like it just did it. As he finds out new things and is trying to understand the world that has now become a ball of snow, you, the reader, are trying to find out as well. Nothing so far feels sped up or confusing. We are all along on the adventure with him. And to me, this is all the good of the first volume. Okay, again, I tried to think of some bad. I couldn't think of any bad. Um, but maybe that will change the later I read the volumes. Uh, I am now. Before anyone asks, well, are you gonna watch the anime even though you got the volumes? Yes, I'm gonna watch the anime. I'm still gonna watch the anime. But in order to make these analyzing type of videos, I have to read the manga just so I can ponder on it longer. And also because anime is an adaptation. It's not the source or original material. And I like to read things from the source slash original material. So because of that reason, I'm not going to be analyzing, or like when I get further in the anime, I'm not going to be talking about the anime. I'm going to be talking about the manga. Okay. So even if I'm ahead anime wise, does not mean that I'm ahead analysis video wise. Okay. So yeah, tell me what you guys feel. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me if you guys are going to read this if you decided to ignore the spoiler warning, or tell me if you guys are reading this, and if you are reading this, what do you like about it without spoiling me? What do you like about it? And what do you hope of this series?